So for these lectures, I try to write up a little introduction for each of our speakers. And today we're pleased to welcome Dr. Judd Birdsall, an assistant professor of practice in the Department of Theology and Religious Studies at Georgetown University. And to be honest, the more I looked into his CV and his bio, the more excited I got about this lecture because he does all these really cool, interesting things. And so just a few of those. He's a senior fellow at the Berkley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs, serves as a project director of the Transatlantic Policy Network on Religion and Diplomacy. He earned his PhD at Cambridge University, where he also founded a research center on religion and international studies and taught as an affiliated lecturer in the Department of Politics and International Studies. He's worked at the State Department, in the Office of International Religious Freedom, and the Secretary of State's Policy Planning Staff. He's also the editor of Religion and Diplomacy, a senior editor and frequent contributor to the Review of Faith and International Affairs. And his writings have been found in the Washington Post, Foreign Policy, The Guardian, Huffington Post, Christianity Today, and Religion and Politics. Today, his presentation will explore explore England as a case study in covenantal pluralism, a relational principled framework for engaging deep religious diversity. His analysis will highlight how the Church of England's evolving role of inclusive ethos can open up new opportunities to cultivate a shared vision of a common good amid growing secularization. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Judd Birdsall.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Professor Saunders, for the introduction, the invitation. Also, it's been really nice being here at BYU, reconnecting with my friend and former colleague, Quinn Meekum, who's now a professor here. He was involved in some pioneering work at the State Department during the year that we overlapped, now something like 15 years ago. Also nice to be here in Provo for a couple of additional reasons. One is that I have for many years suffered with a condition that I call Provo envy. And that's because I have many colleagues who work in religion, religious freedom, religion and world affairs, and they come out to Provo, they engage with the amazing students and faculty here, they post pictures on LinkedIn and Facebook of the mountains and the campus. And I've been to Utah a few times, but have not been to Provo, so I've been jealous of all these posts I see of my colleagues who come out here. So finally, when Professor Meekum emailed me earlier this year to invite me out to Provo, I said, yes, right away. I don't care what the event is or what you want me to speak about. I will just accept any invitation to come to BYU. And we actually came a few days early, and we've had a spectacular, my son and I, spectacularly wonderful Utah experience. Another reason I'm excited to be out here is because for undergrad and for my master's degree, I went to essentially the BYU of American evangelicalism, Wheaton College in Chicago. Different religious tradition, but a similar positionality within our respective religious communities, the flagship academic institution. And I remember when I was at Wheaton as an undergrad looking at the Princeton Review rankings of campus life of schools around the country, and all the areas in which Wheaton ranked really high, BYU ranked even higher. So when I was on campus at Wheaton, we were ranked number 2 in sobriety, campus sobriety. And of course, BYU, I think every year is number 1 in campus sobriety. So keep up the good work there. I was just looking at the Princeton Review rankings yesterday, and Wheaton has fallen to number 9 in sobriety. I don't know what's going on campus. BYU is still number 1. Most religious students, Wheaton is number 7. BYU beat us again, number 4. And when I was at Wheaton, we were ranked number 1 in the country in the Princeton Review for best food, best dining hall. And we wondered among ourselves, is that because we actually have the best food, or are we just a bunch of nice evangelical kids who don't want to complain, want to be grateful for the Lord's provision? So anyhow, a similar ethos, similar sense of mission, similar values, similar code of conduct at our two institutions. And another commonality you'd find between Wheaton and BYU is a lot of students with international experience, international mission experience. I imagine many of you have done your mission service abroad already. And I wonder if you can just think back to your mission or to any time that you've spent overseas. I imagine you reflected or had conversations with fellow Americans about things that you appreciated about your host country. Lessons from that country that you'd like to take back to the United States. Things that host country perhaps did better than the United States. I grew up in Japan. My parents were missionaries there for 20 years. And we frequently talked about things we loved about Japan, things that we thought Japan did better than the United States. Japan is dramatically safer than the United States. Japan's public transit system is orders of magnitude better than the United States. But Japan is culturally, demographically, even topographically very different from the United States. So it's hard to appropriate lessons from Japan to the United States. Easier to do that with England, given all the historic and current links we have between England and the United States, the UK and the US. And I spent about a decade, my 30s, in England during my PhD and teaching there at Cambridge. And I found that among the American expat community in England, when we would get together, we'd frequently talk about things that we loved about England that we'd want to bring back to the United States if we could. Very often it was the National Health Service. The fact that you can live anywhere in the UK, have any sort of job or no job at all, and have excellent health care always. That's free at the point of service. No existential dread about, I have to get a certain job so I can get a certain kind of health care. That sort of fear does not exist in England. It's very liberating to live in a system like that. So people would talk about how they love the NHS, but also on matters that pertain to your topic this fall about citizenship. A number of elements in terms of how England does citizenship, how it does governance, how it does politics, how it governs religion, religion's role in politics. Lots of lessons there that my American friends and I wanted to take back. So my remarks today are really kind of an extended reflection on things I loved about England that pertain to citizenship that I want to share with all of you today. Now, a couple of caveats. There are some things we can't bring back from England. We're not going to have a monarch here anytime soon. Recent protests have made that fairly clear. We're not going to have an established church anytime soon, though some people might think we're headed in that direction. We're probably not going to have a national health system anytime soon in the U.S. Either. But there are still lessons that we can bring back. Another caveat, why just England? Why not all of Great Britain or all of the U.K.? Those are different things, as I'm sure you're all well aware. A couple of reasons for that. I only lived in England. I visited Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, but can't really speak to what it's like to live there. The vast majority of Brits live in England. 84% of the British population lives in England. There's lots of little subtle differences between the four countries of the UK, so it would take too long to explain all those differences. But most important for our purposes today, England has an established church, and that makes it a really interesting case study. The Church of England was disestablished in Wales and in Northern Ireland well over a century ago. In Scotland, the Presbyterian Church is a national church, but not established like the Church of England is in England. So having an established church is really interesting because in most places around the world, having an established church means you have low levels of religious freedom and high levels of religious intolerance, because religious establishments are keen to preserve their established status and often suppress religious rivals, or are complicit with government in suppressing those religious rivals. So having both establishment and religious freedom is a fairly unique situation. And as we think about the role of religion in American politics, particularly in this moment, the salience, the political power of evangelicalism, maybe we think closer to home here, the role of the LDS Church, not established, but certainly has a lot of power and privilege that goes with it. So my outline for today, three things. What is covenantal pluralism? Second, how does England pursue or model covenantal pluralism? And third, what can America learn from England as it relates to covenantal pluralism? So first, what is covenantal pluralism? It's a new term. It's unfamiliar to just about everybody. It was coined by Chris Seipel, who was my first boss when I moved out to D.C. in 2005. He's an expert in religious freedom, interfaith dialogue, religion and world affairs. It's been advanced by the Templeton Religion Trust and in the pages of the journal that Professor Sanders mentioned, the Review of Faith and International Affairs. It's one of many pluralisms that are on offer today: principled pluralism, confident pluralism, and others, all trying to grapple with the same sort of challenge, which is how do we live peacefully and productively amidst our profound, deep differences in ways that are better than just mere tolerance or mere coexistence, the sort of bumper sticker ethics you see around the country. And those approaches can tend to minimize or relativize our profound, ineradicable differences. So to explain covenantal pluralism, I'm going to use a quadrilateral formula from Stephen Prothero, who for many years was a religion professor at Boston University. He said that every religion, and we could add worldview, offers four things. It diagnoses a problem, it offers a solution, it offers techniques to achieve that solution, and it provides an exemplar, someone who has perhaps used those techniques to arrive at the solution. So for Christianity, very basically, the problem is sin, the solution is salvation, we fight about the technique, some combination of faith and works, and the exemplar chiefly is Jesus. So for covenantal pluralism, not a religion, but a social philosophy for how to deal with religious diversity. The problem is all the ways in which we humans fail to live peacefully and productively in our shared spaces. Extremism, terrorism, exclusionary nationalisms, scapegoating of minorities, and so on. All these things that undermine human dignity, undermine good governance. And what's more, some of the proposed solutions are part of the problem, the kind of relativistic, difference-minimizing approaches. No one just wants to be tolerated. We tolerate things that we don't like, tolerate things that we want to go away. After a few days of hiking, my legs are a little bit sore. I'm tolerating that, but I want it to go away. People don't want to just be tolerated. They want to be respected. They want to be known. They want to be loved. The solution that covenantal pluralism offers, Chris Seipel puts it alliteratively as a robust, relational, and non-relativistic paradigm for living together, peacefully and productively, in the context of our deepest differences. So in other words, covenantal pluralism is a social philosophy for dealing with the reality of pluralism, the fact of pluralism, in a covenantal way, that is a serious and relational way, rather than just a contractual or transactional way. Not just you do your thing, I'll do my thing, but something morally serious and deeply relational. And the covenantal here is not a theological term, it's more of a social term about the promise we make to one another to respect one another. The technique are three enabling conditions: religious freedom, religious literacy, and neighborly solidarity. And I'll unpack each of those, and those are the three things that we'll be evaluating when it comes to England in just a moment. So for religious freedom, it's a universal human right enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and indeed in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights from the UN. Why is it a human right? Well, human beings are conscientious creatures. We're spiritual creatures. We are social creatures. We are duty-bound to follow our conscience. Conscience shouldn't be restricted unless it's in a very extreme situation. We're spiritual beings. We seek the transcendent. We seek meaning in our lives. And we're social creatures. We form communities with people who share our beliefs and our values. So religious freedom has private and communal and public dimensions to it. And here I very much commend the work of the LDS Church to promote religious freedom nationally and internationally. I've worked for many years with the Brussels office of the LDS Church and with the Law and Religion Center here at BYU. Religious literacy includes, but it's more than things you might learn in a world religions class here at BYU. 10 Commandments, 5 Pillars, 4 Noble Truths of Buddhism, that sort of stuff. Good to know, but that certainly doesn't exhaust what religious literacy is. It's also, for covenantal pluralism, it's about self-reflection. What do I believe and why, and how does it shape me? And then also trying to understand you. What do you believe and why, and how does it shape you? And then it's also about the capacity to dialogue, to collaborate, to live together in a productive way. My friend Jim Walters, who's at the London School of Economics, says, religious literacy is not so much a body of knowledge as a mode of intercultural engagement. It is a set of skills and competencies that have as much to do with the formation of character as of intellect. And then third, neighborly solidarity. This is the civic character, the virtues that are needed for a peaceful and productive public square. Brings an affective dimension to our discussion of pluralism. Jonathan Sachs, who was the former chief rabbi of the UK, said covenantal relationships are those sustained by trust. Covenant is a bond, not of interest or advantage, but of belonging. And neighbors belong to the same community. They enhance their communal life if they care about one another's well-being. Finally, the exemplar for covenantal pluralism is Roger Williams, who was the 17th century nonconformist who founded what became the state of Rhode Island. And there's two reasons that he's quite compelling for covenantal pluralists. One was that he advocated for freedom of conscience, freedom of religion for all people, not just his own community. because of his faith, not despite of his faith. He was an ardent, orthodox, almost kind of zealous, fanatical Protestant. He started out as an Anglican, then became more of a Puritan nonconformist, and he founded America's first Baptist church in Providence, Rhode Island, but then he left it a year or two later, and by the end of his life, he was worshiping by himself at home, taking nonconformity to its extreme conclusion, I suppose. So, advocating for freedom of religion for all because of, not in spite of, his orthodox beliefs. And also, he combined a principled argument for religious freedom with a pragmatic one, arguing that a lack of religious freedom creates lots of hypocrites. It creates lots of civil discord. And on the other hand, religious freedom, in which people feel free, feel respected, feel enfranchised, leads to social harmony. So enshrining religious freedom, freedom of conscience, freedom of assembly, is the right thing to do and a good thing to do. And in this context, we have to be reminded that Roger Williams was also English. Went to Cambridge, started off in the Church of England, got a royal charter to found Providence. Had a profound influence on John Locke, who then had a profound influence on the expansion of toleration in England and on our founding fathers here in the United States. So to recap, the problem, solution, technique, and exemplar. The problem is all the ways we fail to live together, and part of the problem is the faulty, inadequate solutions that are proposed. The solution for covenantal pluralism is committed, morally serious, relational way of living together. The technique, religious freedom, religious literacy, neighborly solidarity, the exemplar, Roger Williams. All right, let's turn now to then these constitutive elements of of covenantal pluralism in England. And as another caveat, there's no straightforward way to do this. There's no covenantal pluralism index we can look at least not yet. So this would be a largely qualitative exploration of the status of religious freedom, religious literacy, and neighborly solidarity in contemporary England. So first with religious freedom in England. For the sake of time, I won't trace the whole history of religious freedom in England. It's a bit of a sordid tale with lots of burnings and beheadings, but suffice it to say that things are a lot better now for religious freedom in England than they were in Roger Williams' day. And there's no clearer evidence of that than the fact that England has gone from a place that exported religious minorities to a place that imports them, a place that nonconformists wanted to leave, and now a place where they want to come for sanctuary. And there's hundreds of thousands of people that have sought religious asylum in Great Britain today. Here's my quantitative stuff. The Pew Research Center publishes a government restrictions index and social hostilities index related to religion each year. And the scores that England gets on those two metrics, government restrictions and social hostilities, are comparable to countries like Austria, Brazil, Spain, Sweden, South Korea. Good company to keep when it comes to religious freedom and toleration. England is also increasingly secular and diverse, like so many Western countries, and that raises questions about whether it's appropriate to still have any sort of religious establishment, questions about the ongoing role of the Church of England. And this surfaces in four main ways. First, the monarch must be Protestant. He is the supreme governor of the Church of England. Often the king is called the head of the church. The head of the church is Jesus Christ. The supreme governor of the Church of England is King Charles. So he must be Protestant as head of state. The Church of England has 26 seats for its bishops in the House of Lords automatically. No other group has that. England is in the curious company of only itself and Iran in having clerics in the legislature automatically. And there's a debate about whether to scrap that or even to expand it to include seats, automatic seats for other faith groups or belief groups. A third area is state-funded faith schools. My kids went to a state-funded Church of England school doing things that are totally unconstitutional here in the United States, totally fine in England given their setup. But about a third of all state-funded schools, what we call public schools, are religious, mostly Church of England, but many are Catholic as well in England. And there's debates about how religiously selective these schools can be in their admissions policies and in their hiring of teachers and what sort of curriculum they should have. Fourth, all state schools, whether they're religious or not, have to provide religious education and have to provide opportunities, regular opportunities for collective acts of worship, chapel services, that sort of thing. And there's debate about this, and when it comes to worship, pervasive non-compliance with this, because it's awkward to have Christian worship services in a school where there's not that many Christians, active Christians. So the role of the Church of England raises a number of questions, stirs debate, but also, importantly, preserves space for religion, preserves religious freedom. Again, to refer to the Pew Research Center, there are 43 countries that have an officially established religion around the world. Many more have kind of an unofficial establishment or a privileged religion, but 43 have an established religion. And the average score on government restrictions on religion is pretty high. It's 4.4 out of 10. For the UK, it's 2.2, much lower, more in keeping with other liberal democracies. And it's not uncommon to hear religious minorities in England, Hindus, Jews, Buddhists, Muslims, and so on, praise the Church of England for the role it plays in preserving space for faith in an otherwise fairly secular society. In 2012, at an interfaith gathering at Lambeth Palace, Queen Elizabeth II said, "The concept of our established church is occasionally misunderstood, and I believe commonly underappreciated. Its role is not to defend Anglicanism to the exclusion of other religions. Instead, the church has a duty to protect the free practice of all faiths in this country." Next, religious literacy in England. By law, all state-funded schools must provide religious education, RE. A faith school can prioritize its own religion. Non-faith schools have to provide RE that is non-devotional, that's academic, that takes into account the fact that England and Great Britain is historically majority Christian, but also is home now to a lot of religious diversity. And there's 4 distinctives to Britain's RE approach. Not uniquenesses in every case, but distinctives when brought together. First, parents can withdraw their kids from religious education. That's an important protection for religious freedom. Second, religious education is taught by professional teachers at the school who have training on religious education. In some countries, in public schools, they will bring in imams and priests and rabbis to provide religious education, and that's a very different kind of religious education if clerics are teaching it. Third, the approach that England takes to RE is fairly consonant with, resonant with covenantal pluralism. It's moved over the recent decades from a Christian devotional approach to a world religions approach, the sort of 10 Commandments, 5 Pillars approach, to now an approach that's much more about self-reflection, understanding the other, what is religion, why are people religious in the first place, how does it shape our lives and shape the world. And fourth, there's local control of religious education. There's no set national curriculum like there might be for physics or math, or maths, as they say over there. Instead, local councils of teachers, Church of England representatives, and representatives of other religions get together and decide together what their curriculum will be in ways that reflect the local community and the needs of the local community. Now, with all that, we can ask, how religiously literate are the English? There's no national quantitative, there's no national test that they take, that I'm aware of. Lots of qualitative data and anecdotes that would suggest that the English and the Brits overall are fairly religiously illiterate. But one could argue that at least a little bit of religious literacy is better than none at all. In some cases, a little bit of knowledge can be dangerous. A little bit of religion is often very dangerous. A little bit of religious literacy could be dangerous. Go on Wikipedia, read about Islam, be like, okay, I know Islam now. Or you probably have interacted with people who go on Wikipedia, read about the LDS Church, and then think they're experts in it. A little bit of knowledge can be dangerous. But I think overall, on balance, having some exposure to religious education throughout your primary and secondary education is better than none at all. And it socializes you to the idea that faith is a topic for careful study and respectful engagement. All right, neighborly solidarity in England. Of the 3 elements we're looking at today, this one is the hardest to measure. How do you assess a sentiment or a set of virtues? England certainly has this reputation for keep calm and carry on, for orderliness, respectfulness, fortitude, for the sake of the greater good. Challenge to this in recent times has been immigration. 15% of the British population is now foreign-born, and that's reshaped British politics in all sorts of ways, raised questions about national identity and social cohesion. A big factor in leading toward the Brexit vote, leaving the EU. And we've seen a sort of resurgence of more right-wing reactionary politics in Britain even this year. As a counterbalance to that, there's still a lot of institutions in England and in Great Britain in general that bring Brits together. The monarchy still enjoys widespread support, Church of England to some extent, the NHS perhaps chiefly. The NHS encourages citizens to view their taxes as a contribution to the common good. to put the more pressing needs of others above their own. When I file my taxes here in the U.S., I'm keen to reduce my tax burden as much as possible. I pay H&R Block to do that. In England, I felt no compulsion to lower my taxes. I felt much more communitarian over there because of institutions that draw people together, like the NHS. There are also dozens of interfaith groups that build relationships between faith communities so that when tensions erupt, either domestically or with religion-related conflicts overseas, these relationships can be drawn on and faith communities can respond in peaceful and respectful, constructive ways. We certainly saw that during COVID when there was a lot of interfaith response to the pandemic. To quote again from Her late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth, in 2020 during the pandemic, she said, "The attributes of self-discipline, of quiet, good-humored resolve, and of fellow feeling still characterize this country." Sounds better with her accent when she says it. All right, finally, some lessons for America from all of this. Again, we're not going to have a monarch. We're not going to have an established religion. We're not going to have an NHS anytime soon. But a few lessons under these headings of religious freedom, religious literacy, and neighborly solidarity. Like England, America has very strong protections for religious freedom, but I think our vision, our pride in religious freedom is fraying. I've written recently about President Trump's Religious Liberty Commission, which is supposed to issue a report next year framed about getting Americans excited again about religious freedom, but in its framing and certainly in its composition, very, very sectarian and partisan in how it's presented, and I think it'll just add to the polarization we have around religion and religious freedom in this country. A couple of lessons, though. To my evangelical co-religionists in the U.S., again, it's very common to hear religious minorities praise the Church of England for its inclusive, pluralistic ethos and the way it welcomes in minority communities. How often do we hear religious minorities in America thank evangelicalism for the way in which we wield our political power? Rarely, if ever, do we actually hear that sort of thing, which again should prompt self-reflection among my fellow evangelicals. Do we wield power in ways that are inclusive or exclusive? And then for U.S. foreign policy, given that I served at the State Department promoting religious freedom around the world, the UK is closer to most other countries when it comes to church-state relations. Having an established or a privileged religion is much closer to the international norm. America is actually a bit of an outlier with our strong separation approach. So I think the key question for U.S. promotion of religious freedom is not, do you have an established religion, but what sort of established religion do you have? Is it an establishment that it actually promotes religious freedom, or is it antithetical to it? Then for religious literacy, there's a real dearth of religious literacy in the United States, starting with our public schools. Our tradition of separation of church and state, which on balance I think is a very good thing, has led overall to this widespread assumption that you can't teach at all about religion in public schools, that it's unconstitutional somehow. And this has led to pervasive religious illiteracy that hampers mutual understanding, fuels prejudice. It's much easier to hate somebody, to despise somebody, if you don't know anything about them. Again, probably many of you have had conversations with non-LDS folks who know very little, and perhaps that lack of knowledge fuels their cynicism, their animosity towards the LDS Church. And it produces Americans for whom so much of our history and culture is incomprehensible. I tell my students at Georgetown, just walk around the National Mall, visit the memorials and monuments. You'll see lots of religious references that will be incomprehensible to you, or that you might misinterpret if you don't have some modicum of religious literacy. And I'm reminded this week, driving around Utah, you definitely need religious literacy driving around Utah to understand all these place names that you have that are very foreign to those of us outside of Utah. So we need more academic, non-devotional religious education in our public schools and our private schools, where there's a lot more latitude on religious education, need to be preparing students to engage a religiously diverse world. Finally, on neighborly solidarity, amidst all of our diversity and polarization, we have to focus on things that bring us together, that tamp down our natural tribalism. It's certainly not going to be our healthcare system. Brits, it's hard for Americans to comprehend how much Brits cherish their health system. There was a whole tribute to the NHS at the 2012 London Olympic Games opening ceremonies. Unthinkable in the United States. What government agency would receive a tribute at an upcoming American Olympic Games? Hard to think of one. Maybe the Postal Service? I don't know. I have a high deductible health savings account through Aetna. You know, I do not cherish it. I do not have any sense of solidarity that people have the same plan. No sense of connection. No sense of pride in that policy. So we need other kinds of things that foster national unity. Again, driving around Utah, it's hard not to take pride in our national parks. Our national park system has been called America's best idea. They're absolutely amazing. They need to be adequately resourced. They need to be protected from from human and natural threats. Well, in conclusion, I thought it fitting again to return to quoting from Queen Elizabeth from her 2012 remarks to that interfaith gathering at Lambeth Palace. Here she's talking about how an established or a privileged religion can engage hospitably and productively in a pluralistic society. Again, we can think about the United States. Don't have an established religion, but we have very influential religions. In this particular cultural moment, evangelicalism, closer to home here, the role of the LDS Church we can reflect on. But she said at that gathering, and again, just hear her voice saying it sounds much better. Gently and assuredly, the Church of England has created an environment for other faith communities, and indeed people of no faith, to live freely. Woven into the fabric of this country, the Church has helped to build a better society, more and more in active cooperation for the common good with those of other faiths. Thank you so much.
We have about 15 minutes for questions. We have the 2 microphones going around, so please wait for a microphone, and then if you could let us know your name, your major, maybe where you're from, that would be great.
Thank you so much for coming to BYU. I'm Ellie. I'm studying international relations. I love what you said about non-devotional academic study of religion, especially for youth. And what would you suggest the best method of implementing this in our educational system would be?
Good question. I'm not an expert on domestic educational policy. There's people who have thought about this and written about this much more than I have. I mean, one way is, of course, to incorporate it into history lessons, social studies, and that sort of thing, where it naturally comes up. If you don't take it into account in those subjects, you're missing a lot. There are less helpful ways of doing it. I remember I did 1 year in public school in Massachusetts, and this is just an anecdote of a really bad way to do it. It just comes to mind. At the beginning of class, the teacher got up and said, you can do whatever you want in this class because we've already determined who's going to get an A, a B, a C, a D, an F. And students were outraged. How could you possibly do that? It's all based on our hard work and merit. And the teacher insisted, I've already decided who's going to fail and who's going to get an A. And students were in an uproar, and he said, I'm just trying to illustrate Calvinism for you and predestination, which for me as a Calvinist, I took offense at that. That's a terrible way of explaining the doctrine of predestination. So there are less helpful ways of doing it. But some states have experimented with non-devotional approaches. Other states that are trying to weave the Bible into the curriculum, that does cause suspicion. So I think there's ways that undermine the desire to have a non-devotional approach to religious education. But again, there's lots of literature on that subject.
Hi, I'm Katie Higginbotham. I'm studying human development. So we're at a point where we don't have a lot of religious education in our public school systems. How can we as individuals become more literate in religious freedom and that kind of thing?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know if any of you are fans of the TV show The Office. I find that in my own teaching, my pop cultural references are getting more and more dated. I'm getting older, but my students stay 18 to 22. But an anecdote I share with my students, which I'll share here, is I went to a talk many years ago by Rainn Wilson, the actor who plays Dwight Schrute in The Office. Fantastic guy, who is a practitioner of the Baha'i faith. And the only thing I remember about his talk is he said, don't Wikipedia my religion. Don't just go online, Google Baha'ism, Baha'i faith, read for a few minutes and feel like you've got it. And I get his point. But I tell my students and other audiences that actually maybe do start with Wikipedia, or nowadays start with ChatGPT or whatever the kids are doing these days. Start with that, but don't end with that, because you're not going to have a very fulsome understanding of what it means to be Baha'i or LDS or Anglican like I am or anything like that unless you have some deeper reading and also some engagement with a particular community. So if you want to become literate on any particular community or community of faith, read all you can. Start with Wikipedia, but don't end there. But they have some sort of engagement. Visit a temple, a shrine, a church, a mosque, whatever. Ask people what they believe and why and how it shapes them. Another anecdote, when my daughter was maybe 6th grade, she was riding on the school bus to her public school there in Maryland, and she sat next to a Chinese kid who was Buddhist. And she said, why are you Buddhist? Or what do you believe as a Buddhist? And he explained something of 6th grade level Buddhism. And when she relayed the story to me that evening, she goes, he explained Buddhism, and it was just so weird. And I said to my daughter, well, every week we go to a religious facility and we talk about drinking the blood and eating the body of this peasant who lived 2,000 years ago. That's pretty much like peak weirdness. And so every religion seems weird to those who don't practice it. But through engagement, through conversation, we come to see that it's much less weird for other people and actually quite life-giving and very meaningful for those who are in those communities. So read all you can, but also engage in dialogue or even in visitation.
I'm interested from your point of view about what's happening to the term religious freedom.
Ooh, yeah.
Where at one point it was understood to be an expansive and inclusive idea but increasingly it's associated with white nationalism, with homophobia, with with things that we don't love being necessarily associated with religion. I guess my question would be, what do we need to keep our radars up for when we hear this term being bandied about? What is initial caps, religious freedom as we've understood it, and where does this kind of new dangerous use of religious freedom, where might they stand in for each other and counteract each other?
Yeah, no, that's a really important question. I'm glad you asked it. It is true that in our polarization, the very term religious freedom is increasingly contested. Many people view it suspiciously as just a fig leaf for something else, a fig leaf for discrimination, a fig leaf for privilege for just one particular community. I find that with a lot of my students, again, on the East Coast setting, that religious freedom is the combination of two bad words. Religion has a negative affective tinge to it, and freedom, for a lot of them is a partisan term. So you combine the two, and they really don't like religious freedom and are very suspicious of it. I found that when I was serving at the State Department, when I would travel overseas to Laos, Vietnam, Burma, other places, I didn't use the term because it didn't resonate. It was alien or even alienating to a lot of audiences. So I would try to find cognate terms that might resonate more in this case, Southeast Asia. So talking about maybe citizenship or shared citizenship, social harmony, diversity, equality, other kinds of things that are getting at the same idea. And now I feel like we need to do the same sort of contextualization in the United States. When I am talking with more liberal audiences, I tend not to use the term religious freedom because I know it has this partisan, negative affective tinge for them. So I might talk about religious equality or minority rights, things like that might put it in a more positive framing for certain audiences. And then try to explain what I mean as well by that term so that it reduces some of the suspicion they might have. And those of us who work in the field also need to just make clear, rhetorically and in our actions, what we really mean by the term, that it's a principle for everybody. It's not a special pleading or special privilege for one particular community. It's good for all. And so I'm concerned that President Trump's Religious Liberty Commission is almost entirely evangelicals and then some conservative Orthodox Jews. No other types of Jews and no non-believers. America's about a third non-believer, unaffiliated at this point. There's no one who's religiously unaffiliated on that commission. So that to me speaks volumes about what that commission is actually about, and I think doesn't actually help the cause. Thank you for the question.
In a similar vein, it sounds, and I only have what you shared to go on, but it sounds like the Church of England has realized that religious affiliation is not a zero-sum game. Much of the conversation in media and so on starts with the supposition that if we have more affiliates, we're winning. What do you have to suggest, in terms of policy in particular, about shifting the conversation from a zero-sum game to an open-ended game?
That's an interesting question. Certainly, we have a different kind of religion market than England does, and that needs to be said. We have essentially a free market of religion, which rewards religious entrepreneurs. And so you can grow a huge following, you can grow a mega church here in ways that just doesn't quite work in England. In England, if you're a priest in the Church of England, you get the same salary whether your church has 7 80-year-olds or has 1,000 members. Very different here in a religiously free market. So there is just, because ours is more of a marketplace, having an established religion does skew the market a bit, especially in places where you have church taxes, which England doesn't, but other Western European countries do. So if you pay the church tax to the established, say, Lutheran church, and go to another religious group where you also are tithing in some way, you're being doubly taxed in a sense. That does skew the market. And in America, where we have a religiously free marketplace, there is more of a zero-sum dynamic of if you have the sheep, I don't have them, so I need to sheep steal from you. I don't know how we particularly get out of that dynamic, given the way our religious market is set up. I think just a lot of it has to do with how we carry ourselves in public life in the name of our religious traditions. Are we promoting only the well-being, the welfare of our religious communities, or are we genuinely interested in religious freedom for all and in everyone's flourishing? I think it's probably more at that level.
One more question?
Hi, my name is Hannah. I'm a Middle Eastern Studies major, and my question is, so you've talked about how you've worked with the State Department trying to promote religious freedom. So my question is, what are some challenges that you faced in trying to promote religious freedoms, and how have you been able to overcome those?
Oh, great question. How much time do we have? We got could go on and on about that in particular. Number of things that come to mind. Well, one is the rhetorical one that I mentioned in response to this gentleman's question, that the very term is alien or alienating to many audiences. It's either just totally unfamiliar, or religious freedom is synonymous with godlessness or atheism or undermining religious traditions in a particular place. So if I come in as a white Christian American and say I'm promoting religious freedom, and they hear I'm promoting atheism, I'm undermining Islam, or whatever it might be, that doesn't go over real well. So the rhetorical question, trying to vernacularize religious freedom, contextualize religious freedom, that's definitely a challenge. Another one would be the internal challenge of fellow diplomats not getting the importance of religious freedom, or being nervous about religious freedom, or wanting to soft pedal religious freedom, viewing it as something that messes up our bilateral relationship. I remember one colleague of mine who was serving at the embassy in Kabul in Afghanistan back when we had one. I said I worked in the religious freedom office, and he said, well, religious freedom is not a real big deal in Afghanistan because everybody's Muslim. And I thought, it's actually a really, really big deal, precisely because everybody's Muslim, and you have, even at that point, with all the American influence there, you still had the possibility of a death penalty for apostasy or blasphemy in Afghanistan, which meant 100% of the population did not have religious freedom, and there was no peaceful, safe way to critique or reform religious traditions in a place like Afghanistan, which means it was never going to become a liberal democracy. So it is a really big deal. And so you have the external challenges, the rhetorical one. Authoritarian governments tend not to like religious freedom because religious people appeal to a higher power than just the states. So authoritarian leaders are suspicious of religion in general, and of religion which empowers religious communities of all sorts. And then the challenges on the domestic side with people who don't get it, or even are antagonistic towards the idea of promoting religious freedom. But to end on a more positive note, if we are genuine about promoting American interests around the world, if we want countries that share our values, where it's just easy to interact with them, easy to trade with them, we want countries that share our values, that have religious freedom. That's where it's a good thing to do, but also because of our beliefs about inalienable rights, it's also the right thing for us to do as a country to promote religious freedom around the world. And I just add, we do that increasingly in concert with the UK, which has a special envoy on religious freedom, as do many other countries around the world. This is an area where the US has shown a lot of leadership, and a lot of countries have followed suit in creating institutional mechanisms for promoting religious freedom alongside with us. Thank you for the question.